Hello and welcome to Powerhouse Podcast. I am your host, Robert Jones. Today we're going to be talking about concealed carry weapons. Yes, we're going to talk about guns and the part that they play in someone that carries them as a citizen. We're going to be talking about how it is an equalizer and we're not to use it as a piece of aggression, but only as self-defense. And what does that look like? What decisions have been made through courts and through current laws that either help or hinder that Second Amendment right? We ask you to stay tuned and learn more about guns and the part they play in society.
Welcome to the Powerhouse Podcast, presented to you by SAC Life TV. Here's your host, Pastor Robert Jones.
Hello and welcome to Powerhouse Podcast, brought to you by SAC Life TV. I am your host, Robert Jones, and with me is my co-host, Joanne Johnson.
Hey everyone, it's good to be here.
And today we are going to be talking about a topic that may want you to turn this off, but I dare you to keep it going, and that is CCW, concealed carry. Yes, we're talking about guns. So I want you to welcome to the show at this time, Mr. Paul Robins. Hello, Mr. Robins.
Hi, Robert. How are you?
I'm well. So tell us, what is a CCW?
How much time do we have? CCW, concealed carry of weapons. Increasingly in this country, more and more people have concealed carry permits. Well, here's a statistic that will shock a lot of people. More than half of the states in this country, most of us would call it constitutional carry, are not required. You're not required to have a permit to carry a concealed gun. I think it's 29 states now in this country. You can carry a concealed weapon without a permit. In California, of course, permits are required, but the number of permits issued over recent years has been going up and up and up. There's clearly a concern and interest in carrying concealed weapons.
So, I have to let you guys know that I actually have mine myself. And mine, just to be honest, I was sparked by a shooting that happened in Southern California. And I was listening to an interview by a gentleman that was in an office building that this happened. And he actually was in the restroom and he heard the shooting outside. And his response was, it's only a matter of time before he comes in here and I'm dead and I can't do anything.
I don't have a plan, yeah.
I have no plan, I have no way out, And that, man, that was like, hang on a minute, I ain't going out that way,
Yeah.
Me personally.
Yeah.
And that sparked me into going and looking into it. So how long have you been an instructor?
I have been a California Department of Justice licensed firearm instructor for about 2 years. Prior to that, I was an instructor at a firearms training center in Florida for a couple of years. Before that, I've been carrying concealed for about 16 years and training a lot over those years.
Okay.
So, yeah.
How often have you pulled your weapon in those years?
I'm so happy to tell you never. And my intention is to go to my grave having never
to pull your weapon.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll talk more about it as the time goes by. But just right up front, as somebody who teaches concealed carry courses, one of the first things I say in every class, I pose the question, what would you do if something really bad is going down and you've got a gun? And the answer to that question is, if at all possible, do what you would do if you didn't have a gun. That's always the best answer. If you can run. If you can apologize, apologize. Concealed carry people understand we have to be peacemakers. Absolutely. And which means if the gun ever does come out, it's the last possible choice. It's the tool of last resort. So I do carry concealed, and my plan is to never ever pull that thing out in front of somebody else.
I agree with you 100%. I've been in situations where actually I've been confronted and in a threatening way by two men, and I just said, "Look, you need to back away, please, please," and they backed down. And what they didn't know is my gun was in my pocket, my hand was on my gun, but I was trying to I said, "Please, just stop where you are," and they did, and I was thankful for that. I didn't want to be in the Wild West.
And it's worth pointing out in the instances in this country where a good guy with a gun stops something bad from happening, the overwhelming majority of the time, the gun is not fired. The gun comes out and other people change their behavior.
Nope. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Let's talk about some statistics. I think that people might want to hear some of that. You have some statistics for me over there?
Just the issuance of permits has been increasing really significantly in recent years. I don't have statewide numbers. I have some county by county numbers that are interesting. Sac County from 2012 to 2011, 45,000 CCW permits. So that's let me see, for every 100,000 people, that's over 2,800 permits. It's more common, I think, than people recognize.
Yeah.
Depending on the county, every county has its own character when it comes to concealed carry. Historically, San Francisco and LA, they all but did not issue them. San Francisco County, in that same 10-year period, issued one permit for every 100,000 people. El Dorado County, in that 10-year period, issued more than 10,000 permits for every 100,000 people. That's going to include new CCW permits and renewals. Every 2 years you have to renew your permit. But still, it's pretty darn common. And again, we have more than half the states in our country, you don't need a permit, and plenty of people are carrying.
Well, I ran across some statistics also. 98.4% of mass shootings occurred in a gun-free zone. And that is from 1950 until 2020. That is from the FBI. It revealed that a concealed carry permit are not the problem, but they're part of the solution, according to the FBI. Now, what do you say about that?
It gets back to the basic common sense understanding that bad guys don't care about laws. By definition, criminals ignore the laws, and so they'll carry a gun in a gun-free zone. I kind of have two reactions to that. One is, yes, of course, if I'm a bad guy who's up to no good, why not do what I intend to do in a place where there's less chances of encountering somebody else with a gun? Having said that, it's a huge
98.4% according to the FBI.
I'm a statistics geek. I don't know what percentage of the country is gun-free, and I don't know what percentage of large gatherings of people are gun-free. So in fairness, we ought to take that into consideration. But basic common sense says, if I'm a bad guy that wants to do something bad, it's a little bit of a green light to put up a sign that says no guns allowed here.
If the law says we can't carry, for instance, in a movie theater, then when we go to the movie theater, we're not allowed to carry our weapon with us.
Yeah, let me just put in a word for every CCW holder out there. By definition, CCW holders are the good guys, because the bad guys don't take the class. The bad guys don't get a permit. The bad guys don't register their guns. The bad guys don't go through a 10-day waiting period in California and have a background check. So, and that does not mean CCW holders are cowboys. I think people who are concerned about guns and the gun community would be shocked to discover what a really nice, polite group of people the Second Amendment people are in California. I mean, well, you have to be nice because everybody's got a gun. But,
right.
But I mean, it's just like, you're at the bowling league. They're the nicest group of people you ever want to encounter, and they are the law-abiding. That's really worth getting out there. You can go county by county in this country. It's a fantastic book by John Lott. Or you can go state by state. Restrictive gun laws, there is more gun violence. And unrestricted, less restrictive gun laws, there is less violence.
That leads me to going into this Supreme Court argument. It was the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Kevin P. Buren. It was in July 20th of 2021. And since this original article by Lott and Mustard, you just mentioned Lott, in 97, there have been 52 academic empirical studies of the effect of the right to carry laws on various kinds of violent crime. These 25 have found that these laws produce violent crime, while 12 find that the right to carry laws increase violent crime. The remaining 15 studies find no significant effect. Thus, 40 out of 52 studies find that the laws do not increase crime. Restricting evidence to the referred articles only, 22 find crime reduction, and 9 find the right to carry laws increase crime. The social science evidence therefore supports that crime reduction is the hypothesis. Now, in addition to that, the academic researchers agreed that the concealed handgun permit holders are more law-abiding than a typical of American in the ratio of 65% to 15%. So it's huge.
CCW holders commit crimes at a lower rate than cops.
Yes, I read that.
Yeah.
I read that
Yeah,
in looking at this stuff.
They're the good guys. Bad guys don't jump through these hoops. Bad guys don't follow these laws.
Well, I mean, I remember like when I applied to get my CCW, I had to wait. Like at the first, it was like 6 or 8 months just to get an appointment. And then you're going through days and hours of training, and then you have to qualify by actually using, your weapon. Yeah. And then there's all these rules that you have to follow, which honestly, I'm not really against the rules. I'll be honest with you, because we had to qualify, and there was a gentleman, and he was shooting, and he was no more than 6 feet away, and he couldn't hit center mass. Center mass is like this portion of a target. He was all over the place. And I was like, oh boy, does not need a CCW because he could be dangerous.
No, I've had people pay the fee and come take the course, and I can't sign their paperwork, and they don't get their permit through my class. There are definitely hoops to jump through for sure. And starting this year, every county requires a 16-hour course before issuing the permit. There's more background checks than before. There's more interviews than ever before, courtesy of a new law that was passed last year. It's a significant process, absolutely.
Do you feel like when someone does have a CCW, do you feel like they're more responsible because they are? I mean, with your experience. I mean, I know I can talk about myself, but with your experience.
No, that is, you realize what a huge responsibility it is. It's very odd to get your permit and the first time leave the house concealed. And after a while, you get used to it. You never get past the fact that it's a huge responsibility what you're doing. And as I said earlier, so much of the training in a class is about the law of for concealed carry, the risk to you of legal action if that gun ever comes out. It's the last thing you ever want to do. And as a result, I think it's really stressed, certainly in my class, every class that I'm aware of. As I said earlier, we have to be peacemakers. There's a great expression by an attorney, and he said, I got my permit. He grew up in New York where you couldn't have a permit. Okay. Changed states, got his permit, and your first reaction is, oh, I'm carrying a gun. I don't have to take what from anybody. Yeah. Right? And he said, no, you're carrying a gun. You have to take it from everybody. You have to be the peacemaker. You have to be the one that makes sure that there's not violence. Because you have that.
You can't start stuff because you have a gun, or you can't promote it. I mean, for me, there's if I could change one thing about the CCW process, I would say, we have to get qualified, and there's the training class. If I could change one thing, and some of you guys may not like this, I would say over those 2 years that you have it before you renew, you should have to do so much training per month. Like for instance, for myself, I've been super busy and I haven't been able to go to the range and put some lead down range. And because I haven't been able to, I haven't been carrying. Because I don't feel it would be responsible for me to carry because I haven't been practicing and keeping my skills sharp. And so I just said, I'm not going to carry until I can get back down the range and do some more practice.
Yeah, good for you. I mean, clearly there are people who come, you have to renew your permit every 2 years. Clearly there are people who come and who have not, when they have to qualify again, they have not been practicing as much as they should. And I think that one of the reasons I became an instructor is because I enjoyed it, because I practiced a lot. I shot a lot. Eventually my wife said, look, if you're going to spend all that money shooting guns, could you try to make some money shooting guns? And that's one of the reasons that I do it. But it's super important. On the other hand, the 29 states that have permitless carry now, I don't know what your impression is of those places, but the newspapers are not full of people running around shooting each other inadvertently because they have a gun. And so I'm a little torn. I totally hear what you're saying. I really stress in classes, it's a perishable skill. You've got to get out and practice. And more than just shooting, you have to constantly be thinking about scenarios. You have to be constantly updating yourself on the law. One of the reasons we have renewals every 2 years is the laws change, and you have to be up to speed. It's a huge responsibility.
Well, I always get upset. I get upset when people say guns are the problem, because I've owned a gun since I was 9 years old. I got my first gun at 9. My dad gave me a .410, said, this was your great-great-grandfather's. Come on, I'm going to teach you about guns. And at 9 years old, we went out on the back 40, and he showed me how to load it, unload it, how to use it. I grew up with guns, knowing, and they were never a toy. You know what I really believe is now, because guns are so scary, then kids, every time they see one, they're enamored by it. And they go play games like Grand Theft Auto that glorify shooting people. And then the first time we see a gun, we go, well, the problem are guns. No, the problem is you've desensitized kids. I'm getting on a soapbox. Y'all ready? You've desensitized kids by allowing this to be glorified. That's not something we should glorify. We have a lot of music that glorifies killings and things like that. And so for me, I'm like, wait a minute, guns aren't the problem. Because if guns are the problem, all you out there that are fat like me, then forks are the problem. Just get rid of your forks, you won't be fat. No, you're still gonna be fat, just like me. Because it's not the fork that's the problem, it's my appetite is the problem, right? And so that's how I see it. And it makes me a little irritated when people go, well, guns are the problem. No, it's not. No, it's not having properly trained. It's by causing it to be a taboo, then everybody's scared. My wife grew up in California. When I got my CCW, she's like, you're not gonna have that in the house with kids. I said, yes, I am. I'm gonna teach him. I took my son, I taught him how to use it, rack it, train it, shoot it. He respects it. My daughter, she knows all about it. And so now it's not a fear thing.
Yeah.
It is a respect thing.
You demystified it, and you taught the appropriate use. You know, the NRA certainly has a bad reputation in some quarters. It was fundamentally, besides an opportunity to support exercising our rights, our Second Amendment right, it's an educational institution. The Eddie Eagle program through the NRA, whose purpose is to teach children to be safe, and the fundamental lesson for children is stop, don't touch, walk away, tell an adult. Demystifying guns, teaching them a healthy respect for them, that's the way to go.
Absolutely.
For sure. Yeah.
Well, we got a lot more to talk
Yeah,
about.
boy.
So we encourage you to come back. We're going to come right back, and we're going to go deeper into what are the responsibilities of a CCW holder, rules, regulations, states of affair, and things of that nature. So come on back, and we're going to keep going on this topic.
SAC Live TV is proud to sponsor the Powerhouse Podcast with Pastor Robert Jones. If you'd like to be a sponsor, please contact us at info@saclive.tv.
Are you looking for substance in your podcast? Look no further. Introducing the Powerhouse Podcast. Join us every week as we delve into politics, religion, entertainment, and education. Don't miss out. Subscribe now on your favorite podcast platform and be part of the Powerhouse Podcast community. For more information, visit our website, powerhousepodcast.net.
Welcome back to Powerhouse Podcast, brought to you by SAC Live TV. But I believe Joanne has an interesting question from a different perspective.
Yes. So talking about CCW, like before even this podcast, like I really did not know much about CCW. And my question is, why would I even want one? Like I've never considered having a CCW and considered the importance of it. So I'm just curious about that answer. Like why would I need one or want one?
Yeah, Joanne, a great question. And I'm glad a woman asked it. My wife ultimately went with me to this 4-day defensive handgun school that I ended up teaching at because I had guns around the house and she wanted to, be safe around them. My wife is a 5'3" grandma. It turns out as a gun is a great equalizer between little tiny people and bigger people. And Bridget, who's an avid hiker, had a couple of very odd experiences with strangers out on hiking trails. And she ultimately, Bridget's now an NRA Pistol Instructor as well. It's a safety issue. It's a power equalizer between small people and big people. And ultimately, it's just also, again, I've been carrying concealed for 16 years, and Robert's first question was how often you pull the gun out, and the answer is never, and I intend to never. So then why do I carry the gun? For the same reason I have fire insurance on my house. I intend to never use it, right? But if I need it, it'd be good to have. And I couldn't be more pro law enforcement, but law enforcement is a reactive thing. Law enforcement shows up after there's been a crime. They're not there when there potentially is a crime about to be committed. The joke is I carry a gun because I can't carry a cop. So it's insurance that you hope you never use. And I tell you, increasingly more and more and more and more women are filling up my classes. We sometimes do ladies only classes. That's a great question. I hope that was a good answer.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you guys remember when they were doing all this defunding of the police and all that kind of stuff?
Well, how
You
could
guys
you
remember
forget?
that not long
Yes.
ago? Remember
Yes.
that?
Yeah.
You know what I found amazing?
Yeah.
Is all these politicians that were doing the defunding had private security with guns.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
They wanted their security, but they didn't want society to be covered. I found that kind of hypocritical. I know you've never thought about that way politically, because I know, politics aren't that way. Wink, wink.
Yeah. So many of those places are really backing off. And the challenge of replenishing our law enforcement after having given them the back of our hand for a while is a real challenge. Another reason to carry.
Let's talk about law enforcement, because I love this. Law enforcement and their attitude toward CCW. Because I've had personal experience, but what have you experienced as far as, because as a CCW holder, when you encounter a law enforcement person, whether someone pulls you over or whatever, you have to do what?
We have to disclose to them that we have a concealed carry permit and that we're armed, and which you would think, wow, that's really going to be a problem. I said early on in our conversation, concealed carry permit holders are the good guys, right? The bad guys don't get the permit. The bad guys, if for some reason you ever get pulled over, and it may have happened to me, and I'm carrying and I have to disclose, as the sheriff's deputy is walking up, I informed him, Deputy, I want you to know that I'm a concealed carry permit holder and I'm armed. Bad guys would not tell them that, right? Cops know right away. The history of the interaction between CCW permit holders and law enforcement is so positive, people would just be shocked. Because cops get it. Oh, you're a good guy. They recognize there's now a gun. They'll always say, okay, where's your weapon? Okay, please don't go near it. And they still take your license. You'll still get your ticket. But there's a great relationship between law enforcement and the concealed carry community because, again, the bad guys aren't concealed carry permit holders.
Right.
You're identifying yourself as a law-abiding citizen when you tell the law enforcement officer, I have a concealed carry permit officer.
I had an interesting thing happen to me. Our church is in a very, not a good area, to put it lightly. And our church alarm went off at, 2:30 in the morning, something like that. So I get in my car, I drive down to the church, I have my weapon with me. I pull up to the church, the window of the church is open. I put my hand on my weapon in my pocket. I'm walking up to the church. I look and I see a footprint on the windowsill. The alarm is going off. And this is what I love about the CCW training. Look, you guys, you ought to get it. I'm just telling you, this is why I say this. Because it taught me that because I'm a holder, I'm not to go in there, even though that's our building, my church building. I'm the pastor of it. And I could go in there legally. CCW teaches you to back away if you're not threatened and to call the police.
Absolutely.
I did that. I got in my car. I pulled out to the edge of our parking lot. I locked my doors. I called 911.
Way to go.
There was an officer, a couple of officers showed up within not even 5 minutes. I got out of my car, and the first thing I said is, "Officer, I just want you to know I am a CCW holder." He said, "Where's your weapon?" I said, "In my right front pocket." He goes, "Okay, keep your hands out of your pocket. We're good." I go, "Not a problem."
Yes, sir.
Right?
Yeah.
And so they went in, they swept the building.
Because that's their job, not ours. Yeah.
They swept the building, but I really owe that to the training.
Man, I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, that's great.
Seriously. And so I really do appreciate that kind of training, because I do believe that even though we have the right, that it's not always in our best interest to do so. If I would have went in there and someone would have been in there, and they might have took my life or I took theirs, and I have to live with that, I don't really want that. So when we have this license, there comes with a responsibility and a training. So where are we allowed to carry it nowadays?
It's just location-wise.
Yes.
A lot was made of SB2, which was passed last year, which tried to make it all but impossible to carry anywhere. That was stayed by a higher court, and the Bruin decision that you mentioned earlier has made it very clear that we can carry with some limitations. Right now, we can't carry in public, in government buildings. We cannot carry in the airports. We can't carry on public transportation that is funded by any government dollars. We can't carry, we have to honor signs. If somebody puts a sign up that says no weapons allowed, we're required to honor that. Largely public spaces, we are carried, and there's a ton of details we end up covering in the course. What about national parks? What about this? What about that? And we cover all that. But largely public spaces where it's not prohibited, and the prohibitions are fairly narrowly defined, we can carry concealed.
Excellent, excellent. So naturally, schools you can't carry.
Schools, of course.
Places of faith? Now, they tried to say you couldn't carry in places of faith, right?
The law that, again, was stayed would have required your church to put a sign out front that says, you may carry concealed. Without that sign, you weren't allowed to carry. They tried to do it to all public spaces. But, there are stories of people being armed in church, and as a result, disaster was avoided, for sure.
Yeah, I was able to read a couple articles about that, and it is a necessity. So when do people carry? Is it every time they leave the house? When they what would you say? When is the time that people mostly carry?
Back to my insurance analogy earlier. You don't know when the house is going to burn down, and to be competent carrying, you need to practice often, and you need to always be in that mode. I mean, you don't know when you're going to need it, and so most of us would say carry all the time unless it's some circumstance where you're prohibited.
Sure.
Always.
Sure.
So, can I throw something out also as well? When we talk about liability and when we can and cannot legally draw a weapon, whether we're going to fire it or not, if we're going to claim that we did it in self-defense, there are a number of hurdles we have to clear to be able to actually make the case in court that what we did was justifiable. And it's something of a checklist. And people might be encouraged to hear what those things are, because it's a pretty high bar that you have to clear to be able to draw a weapon and use it in self-defense. Number one is the concept of innocence. We cannot use the gun in self-defense if we instigated the argument. We have to be innocent. We cannot be the party that started an argument. That's really important to know, because I think there is a perception, maybe more in California than in most places, that it's a bunch of yahoos with guns looking for a fight. We cannot use a gun in self-defense if we started the argument. The threat has to be imminent, as in it's going to happen right now. Fear of future harm, none of that is justifiable. You can only use it in the moment when you had to defend you or someone else from the risk of death or great bodily injury. Innocence and imminence are important. Our response has to be proportional. Somebody's coming at me with a pool noodle. I can't draw my gun. It has to be. We can only use life-threatening force to meet life-threatening force. And ultimately, what we do has to be declared by a jury as reasonable. Those are really the four hurdles in California: innocence, imminence, proportionality of the threat, and reasonableness. And we drive it home in our classes. The choice you make has to be perceived as reasonable by a jury. And there are legal constructs for determining what is and isn't reasonable. But anyone with a carry permit in California has been through this training and knows the bar is so high, and the cost is so great to draw that gun in any situation where you've made a mistake. Concealed carry permit holders are law-abiding citizens who have been trained, whose goal is to not pull that gun out.
You know, I remember going through the CCW training, and the guy used me as an example. He goes, "All right, stand up. I'm 6'4", I'm 270 pounds, right?"
I love having guys like you in the class,
right?
Because then I'll have you stand next to my wife, right?
Exactly. And they're like, "All right." And they picked up, let's say Joanne. Joanne's about 100 pounds if she's soaking wet. And if she come running at you with a bat, could you shoot her? And I'm like, yeah, she's gonna hit me. He goes, no,
you can't.
No, you're twice as big as she is.
That's right.
If you can stop her in a heartbeat. No, you cannot. So it's like you have to. That's what I love about this training. I mean, I think it is so healthy for people to go through it.
Yeah. By the way, I've had several students take the class not to get their permit, but because it was court ordered, because they'd done something irresponsible with a firearm, and they said, we're going to expunge this from your record if you'll take that 16-hour course and learn something about guns. It's a great class and a good experience.
I honestly think, I mean, if it was up to me, I would have every parent teach their children about guns. I mean, because I was taught that, and I've always had a respect for them. I've owned a gun or a firearm of some sort for 49 years. And I've never had a improper incident, where someone was injured, hurt, or myself, or something like that. But at the same time, I was trained. All my friends were trained. I remember, no kidding, this is no joke. I remember as 13-year-old kids, me and 4 of my friends going out.
Yeah.
Right? All of us had 12-gauge shotguns. We had pockets full of shells, and we go hunting, and we're all on a perfect line, knowing we only shoot from 9 to 3, right? Knowing that, and our parents would let us go,
Yeah.
and we would bring home ducks to eat, and we would bring home birds to eat, and things like that. And it was no big deal. We threw our gun on our back and we went, but we had a high respect of guns.
Yep.
I think the sad part of where we are today in society, especially under some of the current political climate, is guns are bad, guns are evil, do away with guns. And all that does is create a fear. Well, when you have the fear, you don't get to learn them, you don't get to know about it, and therefore you don't have respect, right? Let me give you for example. My uncle, he was 10 years old when he was playing follow the leader over a frozen creek. And him and 4 of the boys were on this ice, and 2 of them fell through the ice, my uncle being one of them, and he drowned at 10 years old. And from that point forward, my mother, which was 5 years younger, she was 5, he was 10, was never allowed to go around water. Never. She had great fear. When she went across a bridge, she feared the bridge would collapse and she'd drown. Yeah. She had great fear. But in her late 40s, she learned how to swim, and the fear left.
Yeah.
And then she embraced it for what it was. She respected water. She knew about it, but she didn't fear it.
Well, it was demystified, and she was safer than she was before when she was afraid of it.
Exactly.
Right.
And so for
That's
me,
a great analogy.
I think that is something that we owe people, is to train them and them know about it. I'm not saying everybody should get a CCW, but they need training on, okay, what if you find a gun? Because people dump guns all the time, and kids find guns, and guess what happens? They end up shooting themselves or a friend accidentally.
I told you, I persuaded my wife to come to that class with me. One of her reasons was I want to be able to pick one, not be afraid of it, pick it up, know how to check and see if it's loaded, unload it if I have to, and put it back down.
Exactly, exactly. So I just, I am a huge proponent.
And by the way, people don't have to take the 16-hour concealed carry course. They can take a 4-hour basic handgun course, and they can demystify that way and learn how to be safe.
And we have your information. I think we're going to pop up your information on our screen, and it's going to talk about how to get a hold of Mr. Robins and go through some of this. So I loved what you said. You made a comment that we cannot instigate. We have to be able to diffuse. And it's a last resort. It's only a defensive measure. Now, I also learned, and I think I got this right, so I'm going to mention it, and you correct me if I'm wrong, that I can only discharge my firearm if someone is within 10 feet of me, because outside of 10 feet, it's not considered a threat.
That's not true. Okay. If someone has a firearm, you can use lethal force if you or someone else is at imminent risk of death or great bodily injury. And if somebody's a decent distance away with a knife, I'm not at risk, right?
Okay.
As soon as that closes, and people can close the distance faster than you think.
Sure.
That's one thing. If somebody's 20 feet away with a rifle pointed at me. Am I at imminent risk of death or great bodily injury? Yes, I am. Okay. Now at 20 feet away with a rifle, I got to be honest, it's, especially if they have a handgun. Handguns are hard to shoot accurately and well, especially if your target is moving. I'm probably running. If it's a handgun, rifle's probably a different story. But is it a life-threatening situation? If somebody's got a gun and you can see them, you're at risk.
So if it's a firearm or something like that, more distance is okay to defend yourself. But if it's not a firearm, a bat, a knife, etc., then you definitely have to wait until it is in your range.
Yeah, and people, we all wish it was just a clear, bright line. Let's be honest, it's a gray area, right? Sure. You mentioned earlier, you and Joanne, you are way bigger than she is, right? If it's you and me facing off, you got me by 3 inches. We're both kind of a couple of old guys.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Might hurt a hip or something.
Right, and so neither one of us, I think, would be justified. It would be a mistake for either one of us to draw a gun. Plus, we're both peacemakers. I know that wouldn't happen. But so there are a lot of things to be aware of in that decision. And again, we stress in class the knowledge that you need, and then in every situation, it's the last thing you do.
Well, you brought some excellent information, some great statistics. So I just encourage you guys to really, again, we're going to put the information on the screen for you guys to check this out. You may not want to carry, and that's fine. We're not asking you to, but it is good to be educated. Education in any form or fashion is going to be beneficial to you, and that's what we're here to do today. So thank you so much for your time.
You bet, Robert.
This has been great. Appreciate it. And stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
SAC Live TV is proud to sponsor the Powerhouse Podcast with Pastor Robert Jones. If you'd like to be a sponsor, please contact us at info@saclife.tv.
Are you looking for substance in your podcasts? Look no further. Introducing the Powerhouse Podcast. Join us every week as we delve into politics, religion, entertainment, and education. Don't miss out. Subscribe now on your favorite podcast platform and be part of the Powerhouse Podcast community. For more information, visit our website, powerhousepodcast.net.
Welcome back to Powerhouse Podcast, and we're here with our good friend Paul Robins. We're talking about CCW, and I mentioned a Supreme Court case from 2021, and it was their argument, or part of their argument was, hey, by these laws and restrictions, it's costing more. Therefore, the people that can carry legally is reduced, and it's very discriminatory toward people that are not as wealthy. Yeah. So what is your response to that?
Well, amen is my response to that. Okay. Clearly in California, every decision that has been made has made it more and more expensive to be a responsible gun owner. SB 2 last year increased the number of hours required for training from 8 to 16 hours for your initial permit.
What would that cost?
The cost of my 8-hour class was $189. It's now $300. Okay. So it's twice as long and not twice as expensive, but it's much more expensive. Mm-hmm. Every county chooses its own fees. There are counties like Sonoma County where it's $500 to get your CCW permit. On top of that, besides making it more onerous to jump through the hoops to acquire ammunition, starting in July of this year, ammunition and firearms are going to get an additional 15% tax on them. So it's become more and more and more expensive, and clearly that's a tool of the state to make it more difficult to have and use firearms. Mm-hmm. And the impact there, of course, is that I've been very fortunate, and I can still afford firearms and ammunition, and I shoot a lot, and I really enjoy it. Mm-hmm. But it's going to impact the poor disproportionately. Right. It's made it more expensive to exercise a constitutional right. And, people who are poor, they may very well be living in a neighborhood where it would be more important for them than it is for me to be able to defend themselves.
Well, look, I'm of the belief in the camp, and people are not always going to line up with me, and that's okay. And that is, I believe the government says we're doing this for your benefit, but what I believe it is, it's trying to take gun ownership, legal gun ownership, out of people that are in poverty situations. And so what are they doing? They're allowing only people of certain economic status to own guns. And so really what you're doing is you're kind of taking this group over here and saying, we're going to make it to where you can't even afford it.
Yes. Yeah. No.
That, my friends, is discrimination in its highest form. And they're going to do it in the name of protection. It is a lie. I'm telling you, I am so like, that fires me up so much, because when I was younger, I was poor. I mean, I was so poor I couldn't pay attention. I mean, I was poor. I mean, I ate government cheese. I mean, I was poor. And if it would have been like in today's society, there's no way. My grandmother made $600 a month and I lived with her. I worked shoveling horse manure for $1 an hour. There's no way. It took every penny I had just to buy my clothes.
Yeah.
So I would have been one of those on the outside saying, I can't afford it, so I can't protect myself.
Yeah.
And then we wonder why that crime is running rampant in poor neighborhoods. Well, they can't defend themselves. So of course they're going to run rampant.
That's an argument that clearly that you made well. And to answer broadly that question earlier, between paying for the class, paying for your fingerprints, live scan and background check, and paying for the permit and acquiring an appropriate, reasonable concealed carry weapon, you're easily out, easily $1,000 and probably more like $1,200–1,300. So it's not a small amount, and the cost of it, I do believe, is a tool in the hands of those who would like to have fewer people exercising their Second Amendment rights.
Absolutely.
So is everyone that goes through this process of getting their CCW, are they guaranteed the issue of their permit after?
These days we use the term shall issue versus may issue. It used to be, we may give you your permit here in California. Tell me why you want one. And now it shall, courtesy primarily of the Bruin decision that Robert mentioned earlier. Now, if you don't have a criminal record of any kind, you have a clean background check, you go through the interview process and you pay all their fees, they shall issue. San Francisco and LA counties are now issuing, and they weren't before that, essentially, virtually weren't before that Supreme Court decision. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I really hope that this gave you guys something to think about, and I know it sure did for me. And next we're going to have on a good friend, John. He's going to talk about what is it like to carry as a business owner and just a citizen in California. So once again, thank you, Mr. Robbins, for your time.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it, and stay tuned for our next segment.
SAC Live TV is proud to sponsor the Powerhouse Podcast with Pastor Robert Jones. If you'd like to be a sponsor, please contact us at info@saclife.tv.
Are you looking for substance in your podcasts? Look no further. Introducing the Powerhouse Podcast. Join us every week as we delve into politics, religion, entertainment, and education. Don't miss out. Subscribe now on your favorite podcast platform and be part of the Powerhouse Podcast community. For more information, visit our website, powerhousepodcast.net.
Hello and welcome back to Powerhouse Podcast. I am your host, Robert Jones, and with me is John Riga. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Robert.
We'll be talking about CCW and some of the obstacles and things that we face and why we carry and things of that nature. Now, you're a holder, is that correct?
Correct.
So tell me, as a business owner, as a citizen, what does it mean to you? Why do you do it? Just kind of share with me what you think about it.
Well, just with crime the way it is today, you just never know when you're going to be faced with a need to defend yourself. And the hope is you're never in a situation where you have to defend yourself, but you only get one chance to respond to a situation that's lethal or deadly. And so that's why I got my CCW, was because if I'm faced with a situation where my life or someone around me's life is at risk, and it's imminent, the defense would be a weapon of deadly force.
Yeah, I loved what Paul said. He said, that's why I have insurance, fire insurance, flood insurance, earthquake insurance. I just recently paid my earthquake insurance for my home. And, I don't think we're going to have an earthquake in Sacramento that's going to level my home. But you know what? If a tremor comes, I'm not worried about it. We have insurance, right? And so I I kind of subscribe to that, having the insurance, having that peace of mind. Now, some people have said, well, you're just fearful and that's why you carry. And I never seen that I was fearful. I don't think that way. I don't feel that way. I see it as being more prepared. What's your mindset when you carry versus when you don't carry?
Well, it's funny because I don't always carry, even though I'm licensed. If I'm running to the store real quick, I won't necessarily take my sidearm. But when I feel the need, if I'm going to be in a group or be in a situation, I'll carry it for the sole purpose of being able to defend myself. And Paul talked about some of the rules, the avoidance and reasonableness. As a CCW holder, you'll be very aware of the responsibility and avoid a situation any way possible, including sucking it up and turning around and leaving a situation that might be threatening to you, but doesn't rise to the level of using deadly force.
Sure. I was talking just with Joanne in our office. It was, I think it was yesterday or the day before. And she was telling me about an incident that she had just driving down Watt Avenue right here. Joanne, tell us quickly about that.
Yeah, I was driving home with my son, picking him up from school. And all of a sudden, before we know it, there's shooting going on right in front of us. There's just cross shooting. The guy to the right was shooting across from us, and then the guy on our left stopped his car. He got out. I thought that his cell phone had fallen on the ground, but then I realized it was a gun. He picked it up, and then he started shooting back at the other guy. So this was happening right in front of us, and it happened so fast. But, and I was talking to Pastor Robert, would things have gone differently had I been a CCW holder? Would I have done anything different? Like, what are the rules, regulations? Like, does that change anything?
That's a really good way to relate things, because as a CCW holder, you want to get away from that situation, not draw your gun, call law enforcement. You're not the hero. You're not law enforcement. You don't have those rights. So, that's just one situation of many that can occur where you want to avoid a situation when possible. Even if there's a threat, it's not your place to defend it.
Yeah, and I was talking to Joanne about that, and I said, hey, look, I said, in that situation, I said, they broke all kind of gun laws right there.
Yeah.
And it goes back to the bad guys don't follow laws, right?
Mm-hmm.
Only good people follow laws, right? And I said, yeah, in a situation where you find yourself in that even if you were a CCW holder at that time, you had your firearm on your side, and this is happening, it is not at you. It was something you were witnessing, but it was not at you. So you would have to actually just stay away, back away, and try not to get involved in any way, shape, or form. But that is kind of what's going on in culture today. Mm-hmm. We have things that are happening that are outside the law. And, I think I mentioned, in this one shooting that happened in Southern California years and years ago, I was watching this video. 18 gun laws were broken. 18. So it doesn't sound to me like gun laws are the answer.
Well, no. I mean, the bad guys, like Paul said, don't follow the rules. They're not going to get their CCW, and they're just going to do what they do against all laws. A CCW holder, on the other hand, a story, I was pulled over a few months ago for not stopping all the way at a stop sign, and rolled my windows down, had my hands on the steering wheel. He approached my car on the passenger side, and I told him I was a CCW holder and I have my weapon with me. And he asked me where it was. I told him it was in the back seat. And he said, great, give me your ID. I gave him my ID and registration, went back to his car, came back, gave me my driver's license and registration, and said, next time stop at the stop sign, and left. So I don't know if that really influenced him or if he was just having a good day, but nonetheless, he identified me as a good guy.
Yeah, well, that's today's. We need more of the good guys. And I think that would kind of curtail this. I've been a huge proponent of the training. How do you see the training has helped, hindered? How would you encapsulate that or describe what the training's done for you?
Well, first of all, as a CCW holder or anyone that owns a weapon, a gun, they need to train with it. They need to shoot it, because the mystery around a gun, it's loud, it's impactive, it has that kick to it. So a lot of people are afraid to handle a gun because of just the physical senses that happen when you're firing. So I do my best to go out once every 3 months at minimum, and I'll shoot 50 to 100 rounds, and might be an indoor range or an outdoor range, whatever the case is. Knowing how to handle your weapon and knowing how to fire it and aim it and use it is the responsibility of any gun owner, not even a CCW holder, a gun owner, because you can legally own a gun and have it in your home and not be a CCW holder. And I've seen a lot of people, not only at ranges, but in different scenarios that I've been privy to, where people shoot their weapon and they never hit anything. They're shooting at a target or whatever the case is, and they're so unskilled that having that weapon is more of a liability than it is an asset.
Absolutely. And I think that that's something that people may misunderstand. I am not a proponent of everybody that can have a gun, get a gun. I'm just not. Even though I believe in the Second Amendment, don't get me wrong, I believe. But people that have mental health issues should not have a gun. It's not safe for them or others. And people that are not skilled or don't put in the training, it's more of a liability than a blessing. Now, can they be trained? Absolutely, but you got to put the time in it, right? You got to put the effort in it. And so that's why I'm such a proponent of training, because I think training is really what opened my eyes of what is actually what you can and cannot do. Something that shocked me when I went through training was the instructor told me, he said that he gave us these scenarios. Someone kicks the door of your house in and they walk over and grab your TV and walk out. Can you shoot them? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, no. He's like, no, that's personal property. You're in a park. You're on your laptop. You're working. And somebody comes up, takes your laptop and walks away. Can you shoot them? Yeah. No, that's personal property. So you can't shoot people for taking your stuff. You can only use your firearm if you're threatened.
That gets down to the term that Paul used, proportionality. So if someone steals something from you, you're not threatened, your life isn't threatened. You can't use deadly force. So your force has to be proportionate, and it's got to be reasonable. So if a person breaks into your home and steals your TV, they're not hurting you. So you can try to stop them, but you can't use deadly force.
Exactly. And I think, too, another thing about guns and proper training, with CCW training, they taught me how to store a gun. Now, when I grew up, we just had them laying everywhere, and that was just the way we did it. In the state of California, you have to have it locked up in some way, shape, or form. And I think that's wise. I think that prevents people from getting them and doing something with them if you're not going to train them. And apparently that's where we are. What kind of training have you received that you think is most valuable?
Well, I went to Paul's training, actually, and went through his course. I don't have to tell you, the first time I was licensed many years ago and let that license expire, and in the last year became relicensed through Paul's course. And I've been involved with the Sheriff's Department and law enforcement for many years in different capacities. And Paul's training is absolutely phenomenal. I can't speak enough to it. He's just a great instructor, a great trainer, and I would say that becoming or engaging in CCW, you have to take the time to get trained.
So investment in the training is key. It's paramount. It's going to be able for you to handle a firearm in a respectful, safe way. Just because you have a firearm doesn't give you the right to not store it properly. It doesn't give you the right to use it any way you see fit. No, once you have a firearm, you have a deep responsibility. And you need to be trained on that. So again, from John, from myself, we highly encourage you to get the proper training. Even if you're a gun owner and you're not carrying it, you have a gun at home. One of every 4 houses in California, there's an adult with a gun. So if you have that, please get trained properly because it's important. And train those around you so that they will know. John, there is this thing called Posse Comitatus Declaration. Can you expound on that?
Well, it's pretty detailed, but in brief, it's a Latin phrase from 1878 that was adopted that enabled law enforcement to deputize civilians and expressly was not enacted to give any additional rights to military or other agencies. So, for instance, if you're in a situation today and you come across a sheriff or law enforcement person that is being threatened or needs help, he can declare posse comitatus to the civilian, and you're essentially deputized with the same laws and rights as a deputy. So in that instance, if you're not concealed carry permitted and have no weapon with you, then you've only got your hands or other items to defend yourself or help the sheriff. Mm-hmm. In the case where you've got a CCW, you can now use lethal force if that's called for. And it's been used a few times. It's not common, but it's been used throughout the country, and it's a national law. And I think it's a valuable law to have, because as a CCW holder, if I came across a law enforcement person that was being attacked or whatever the case is, and he needed help and declared posse comitatus, I would then be able to defend him at the highest level with deadly force if needed.
Interesting. Well, that just goes to more of the argument how important it is to have training.
100%, because if you've got the weapon and you're not trained, and you shoot somebody innocently on accident, that's not a good thing.
Well, John, I want to thank you for your time and your input on this.
Thank you, Robert.
It's been great having you, and for all of you listening, I hope this shed some light on this issue, and hopefully you will not fear guns, but you will understand that you need to be trained on them properly. They're not something to be feared, they're something to be trained on. Thank you, and thank you for joining us. Have a great day.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Powerhouse Podcast. If today's conversation resonated with you, remember to subscribe, rate, and review us on your preferred podcast platform. Your feedback helps us in our mission to engage in deep conversations that impact mindsets and create a practice of introspection. Do you have an idea or a topic for a show? Message us at php@saclife.tv. Remember, your voice matters, and together we have the power to influence positive change in our world.